Hello and welcome to Food Techies. We all love tasting different foods. Do you all know that there is a profession of tasting foods? Oh yes, that's the profession of sensory evaluators. So today in this video we are going to see about sensory evaluation. Come, let us go into the video. Sensory evaluation is a test or process used to measure, analyze and interpret human reactions to meet sensory characteristics as perceived by sight, smell, taste and touch. Actually, this is an important step done during a product is reframed or it is being done with any innovation. Only by this process we can assume whether this product will be acceptable by the consumers or not. Now let us see about these types of tests done for sensory evaluation. Basically, the sensory evaluation is done in two aspects, that is the product oriented evaluation and the consumer oriented evaluation. Under the consumer oriented or hedonic tests, preference, acceptability relative to ideal test will be conducted, whereas the product oriented or analytical test is divided into two as descriptive or quantitative and discriminative tests. The simple descriptive, profiling, time intensity all comes under quantitative test, and paired comparison, Diotrio, triangle, R-index tests comes under discrimination tests. Now let us see them in detail. First, let us see about the hedonic tests. This test is done with consumers, that is the untrained panels. In this, all the samples will be same. They will give two or more samples and ask for its preference, acceptability, etc. Next is the analytical test. In this analytical test, simple descriptive, profiling and time intensity are done. In this test, a single product and its parameters like flavor, taste, color, etc. will be done. Next comes the discrimination test. Here let us see them one after the other. First is the paired comparison test. This paired comparison test is done to find the presence of any difference between the placed samples by tasting them with one after the other. This has two types, that is the difference paired comparison test and the directional paired comparison test. In the difference paired comparison test, just two samples were placed and the panels taste them and will find if there is any difference between them. Then comes the directional paired comparison test. In this, two samples will be placed and the specific parameter like sweet, spice, salt, sour will be tested, like which has more intensity in it, and the test results will be recorded in the given report. Next comes the triangle test. This triangle test is done to find the odd one out. That is, in this test, three samples will be given, in which one will be different. So the panels will be asked to taste the three samples. For example, if we have two samples as sweet and one sample as sour, the sour sample should be identified by the evaluator. So this is the triangle test. Next comes the Diotrio test. In this Diotrio test, panel member will be provided with three samples and one will be marked as reference and the other as A and other as B. First, the panel member should taste the reference sample. Then he should remember about the reference sample's color, flavor, taste and all the parameters. And next the panel member should taste the A sample and B sample and should say which is matching to the reference sample. So this is the Diotrio test. Next comes N alternative forced choice test. The letter N represents the number of samples. This test is almost similar to the paired comparison test. The paired comparison test is restricted only to two samples. So, in a case, one has to test the same property of paired comparison test for more than two samples. At that time, they may switch on to N alternative forced choice test. The name for this test came from there are more samples present, but we are forced to choose only one of the higher intensity sample or the lower intensity sample. Next comes the alternate A not A test. This is almost same as Diotrio test. That is, there will be a reference given to the panel and the panel should taste the reference sample and remember about its parameters. After tasting this reference sample, the reference sample will be removed. Then the sample A and the sample B will be given. So the panel member should taste the sample A and B and should compare with the reference sample and say which sample is matching to the reference sample. Next comes the standard A0A test. The standard A0A test is almost similar to alternate A0A test. In alternate A0A test, the test sample will be given and the panel member should remember the parameters and must taste the next sample. Whereas in this test, the two samples will be given to the panel member at a time and said as this is A and this is not A. So the panel member should taste those two samples and remember which is A and which is not A. Then after removing that A sample and not A sample, another two sample will be given or a single sample will be given to the panel, and the panel should taste the next given sample and should say the given sample is A sample or not A sample. This also has some of the types like monodic A0A test, paired A0A test, replicated monodic A0A test, replicated mixed A0A test. First, let us see about monodic A0A test. In this test, all the steps will be done as per standard A0A test. Then, single sample will be given for tasting and asked for whether it is A or not A sample. Next is the paired A0A test. In this, samples like a standard A0A test will be given. Then the panel will be given for two samples and asked whether the sample is sample A or not sample A. Then comes the replicated monodic A0A test. In this test, after tasting those samples, the panel members will be given another set of samples. Those samples will have whether fully A or fully not A. So the panel member should taste the samples and say whether it is fully A or not fully A. Next comes the replicated mixed A0A test. In this test, the samples will be given, that is A sample and not A samples will be given to the panel and will be tasted. After removing those A sample and not A sample, two samples will be given to the panel members. In those two samples, it can be whether it is A sample or not A sample. So by tasting those samples, the panel should find whether it is A sample or not A sample. So at last, I hope that you all got a clear idea about how and why the sensory evaluation of food is done. And also I hope that the video was useful to you. Thank you.